All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are super excited to have Mr. Bradley Hook on with us this afternoon or late morning, depending on where you are, to speak to us about resilience. Bradley is a partner at the Resilience Institute Global. He's worked internationally in a range of roles spanning media, technology, and human development. His writing has been featured in a range of business and travel magazines, including several cover stories. He is the author of the book called Resilience Mastery and the director of a documentary called Waves of Freedom about surf therapy, a program that supported troubled youth. So we're super excited. It's been a very stressful time here in our industry as of late. Over the last couple of years, a lot of people experiencing high levels of stress, high levels of disturbance and disruption, whether it be economically or socially, health-wise, mentally. And so we found that this subject was really timely given where we are in our state of being. And hopefully you leave today with tools to not only improve yourself and your personhood, but then to spread that out into your social network and help other people find those same types of benefits. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bradley Hook.
Thank you so much, Erica.
You're welcome.
Thank you all for joining today. I'm excited to spend some time with you. My favorite workshops are usually around 21 hours long, so we may need to skip over a few things, but I'll do the best I can to add value to your day. So what is resilience? I actually spent many years interviewing highly resilient people, and something that one individual said to me really resonated. He was actually a Kung Fu master in Vietnam, and he had dealt with extreme adversity over the course of his life. He said to me that resilience is a small flame that we carry with us through our lives. We can nurture that small flame by developing new skills, some of which I'll share with you today. He said we can rely on that flame in times of challenge, and we can use that flame to illuminate the path for others. And I think as leaders, that's a really important aspect of resilience, is being the change we want to see. It's a powerful idea, and it led me to discover the Resilience Institute's definition of resilience. So Resilience Institute has been around since 2002. It's a research-based organization where we support individuals and organizations on that journey towards increased resilience. And the definition of resilience from the Resilience Institute perspective is fourfold. It's first and foremost a learned ability. We're not born resilient. We learn these skills. Often it takes 18 years or sometimes much more before we're prepared to go out into the world and practice resilience and deal with life's challenges and disruptions and change. So we can learn these skills. That's a powerful idea. The first component is bounce. The research shows that 77% of the time, humans actually grow as a result of dealing with challenge. It's called post-traumatic growth. We naturally do bounce, but the objective of resilience is to notice when we're on a downward spiral and have the skills to bounce forward rather than back fast. And we're going to look at that downward spiral today. The second component is growth. This is about developing a set of skills that enable us to stay well and positive. Research into epigenetics, for example, shows that certain practices like relaxation, who would have thought relaxation would one day be considered a practice, but it can actually suppress genes that are ultimately responsible for inflammation. Neural plasticity shows that our brains change throughout our lives based on how we're using them. So if I'm practicing a lot of anxiety or rumination, looping over thoughts of the past, I get really good at accessing those thought circuits. However, if I have the skills to train my mind to stay really present and focused, then I get really good at doing that. That's growth. You've also probably heard of growth mindset, which is finding creative ways to solve problems, really important practices that we can engage with day to day, hour to hour, every week, month, year of our lives. Connection is the third component. It's foundational. Being there to support others and having others who we can rely on. It turns out that emotional intelligence, our EQ, is twice as important as IQ and technical skill combined for leaders. In a world where we've become increasingly connected to screens, as we are right now, being able to tune into the other person is a superpower for success, right? Especially for young people. How can we re-engage that emotional intelligence so that we can really tune into the nonverbal cues, to people's posture, to their vocal tone, and so forth, so that we can really create trust and build collaboration? Really foundational. And the fourth component, and in many ways the outcome of resilience in terms of our resilience program, is flow state. Those moments in our life where we are completely focused on an activity where our skills match the challenge. Runners call it the runner's high. Musicians call it being in the pocket. Other high performance athletes call it the zone. How can we deliberately create the conditions for flow? Because if we don't, chances are we're going to be in a distracted state. Hypervigilance is really common, leading to mental fatigue, and the days just pass by rapidly. Can we create the conditions for flow state, just like a high performance athlete does? And we'll look at those criteria for you over the course of today. So resilience in many ways is about how we respond to life's challenges. Some of us are optimistic and playful in the face of change, although I dare say the past couple of years have changed that for many of us. We've dealt with so much adversity, so much change, so much disruption. I'm sure you've seen shades of these expressions on Teams calls and Zoom calls and with your teams over the past few years. How do we know how they're feeling? Through our emotional intelligence. We can detect someone's emotional state just through a facial expression, posture, and so forth. Who's most likely to enjoy and thrive amidst all of this change and challenge? Well, it's the people who are able to stay calm and relaxed and playful and curious. Top left, for example, who's going to remember this? Who's going to enjoy the benefits of neural plasticity as a result of learning from the experience? Probably those who are not in fight, flight, or freeze mode of our nervous system. So let's take a closer look. A lot of people used to think that resilience is all in the mind, it's coping strategies, but it turns out that our bodies respond to the challenges of our lives. So you may have heard of fight, flight, and freeze mode. It's what a zebra activates when it's running away from a hungry lion. Well, to be specific, it activates flight mode. You only fight the lion if there is no other choice. If you think back, humans evolved in a very similar environment to our friend, the zebra. We had similar predators. We evolved in this environment where there were direct threats to our survival. However, in our modern upgraded world, we are dealing with much more abstract threats, yet our nervous system doesn't know the difference between a lion and a performance review or an inbox full of emails or a customer meeting or a supply chain issue. Our body doesn't understand the difference. When you detect a threat in the environment, the body releases cortisol and adrenaline to help us fight or get away. And what's really interesting is we used to think procrastination was some form of laziness. It's not. That is actually a freeze activation. When there is so much threat in the environment, and sometimes it's just virtual, it's just emails and things to do, the safest thing to do is to freeze, do nothing. Think a deer in the headlights. Deer evolved for millions of years without cars in their environment. And so when they're walking along in the night, confronted with this information, bright lights, and a sound of something zooming towards them, the safest thing for them to do is nothing, freeze. You do this when you encounter a snake in the grass, for example. The snake freezes and we freeze, and whoever acts first is usually the one who wins. And often it's the snake who goes in the other direction, which is a good thing. When we're calm, you see flow state on the left-hand side. We're able to activate our resources deliberately, and we can create rhythms that really support high performance, going from relaxed, the bottom left, up into flow and riding that wave back down. Think a tennis player. Tennis players know that if they don't take those micro breaks during the big match, chances are they're going to end up in fight flight mode, and there might be a John McEnroe moment. So how can we create rhythms that really support our resilience, remembering that if we spend all of our time in that peak mode, fight, flight, freeze, chances are we're going to start feeling overwhelmed. We might experience what has been called burnout. We might find ourselves disengaged, distressed. From a resilience perspective, We use a spiral to describe the different states and stages of resilience we experience over the course of our life. Today, I'm going to take you on a whirlwind tour of the resilience spiral, and our objectives are insight. Can I recognize how I am doing in real time? Can I describe where on the spiral I am? Mastery. Do I have one or two skills I can rely on to move me up to where I need to be? Empathy is critical as a leader. It's the ability to support others, to notice how others are doing. How are they on their own journey? What does their spiral look like? Where are they today? And finally, influence. Can I create the conditions for flow state, my high performance zone? When people are in flow, we're up to 500% more productive. When teams are in flow, they double their productivity, but it's also intrinsically rewarding. It's those times when you know that you need to deliver an important report and you do it in record time. Unfortunately, most of us create the conditions for flow based on urgency. 10 p.m. on a Thursday night and the report's due tomorrow, and somehow we manage to do it. We go, wow, imagine if I could always achieve that level of performance. There are certain things that you did at 10 p.m. on that Thursday night that you're probably not doing at 9 a.m. on a Thursday morning. We'll look at that in a moment. So because we have a short session, I'm just going to give you a quick breeze through our downward spiral. It's an important model of mental health, mental fitness, and many leaders use this to have more effective conversations with their teams, as well as just noticing those signs and signals of a downward spiral in themselves. So, confused and disengaged, those two levels there are all about the mind. This is the default for many of us. We're overloaded, we're experiencing what's called mindless busyness. We're rushing from one task to another, being reactive rather than proactive. We get to the end of the week and we feel like we haven't made the progress we would like. This can lead us to feel fatigued. The brain is not a computer. The brain is much more like a muscle. And if we don't provide it with regular breaks, it will naturally start to take those breaks. And during those moments, we might find ourselves down an internet rabbit hole. We might find ourselves drifting into thoughts of the future, ruminating over thoughts of the past, whatever we've been practicing a lot of, anywhere but here in the present where life is happening. Then we've got emotional elements on the downward spiral, withdrawn, vulnerable. So think of a sports player. They've been overwhelmed in a big sports match. They're in the change rooms. If they made a mistake, they let down their team, something went wrong, what do? They withdraw. We naturally push people away. We might be quite professional in a work environment. We get home after a really busy day and we just need some space, push people away. From a survival perspective, humans as a social species really do need connection. And when we start to withdraw and push people away, that can be a real risk to our resilience. The vulnerable level is when our emotions, what are emotions, by the way? Well, the Latin movare means to move. That's where the word emotion comes from. Emotions move us through our life. They push us away from potential pain and suffering, pull us towards novelty or pleasure or things that we're curious about. Can we engage our emotions to help us on this journey of life? Absolutely, and we'll look at that in a moment. But sometimes our emotions, our motivation doesn't support us. And we might find ourselves, with the only way to relax our hyperactive nervous system is a bottle of wine and Netflix. Doesn't sound that bad, but if it's the only way that we can relax ourselves, that might start to become a real issue. It's when we wake up and we usually go for a walk in the morning, but we just hit the snooze button maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 times. And we realize after a couple of months, wow, I'm not feeling as well as I used to. And this can manifest in lots of ways. And then at the bottom of the downward spiral, we've got physical distress. The body starts to show signs and symptoms of inflammation. If you think about it, when you've been in fight-flight mode for an extended period of time, all of that cortisol, all of that adrenaline, it's actually not good for us. The zebra evolved to use the fight-flight response in short bursts, acute stress. And that works. That can help us. That can help us really activate our resources for a challenge. But if we're running away from thousands of virtual digital lions and tigers all day long, we're connected to the news, which is mostly negative, activates fight-flight response, over time, all of that cortisol is really bad for us. It can make us unwell. It can create inflammation in our body. That eczema flares up, that asthma comes back, irritable bowel. There are so many things that happen. Or we find many leaders go on holiday, and on that first day of holiday, they start to get sick. Very common pattern, because when you're in fight flight mode, the immune system is suppressed. You don't need immunity when you're running away from lions and tigers. And as soon as you start to relax, it comes back online, and we notice that we've been under a lot of pressure. And at the bottom of the spiral, really important, we use depression as a placeholder. It could be a major health event. We've all been to the bottom of the spiral over the course of our lives. In fact, we worked with 300 C-level executives. And of the 300, 80 were at the bottom of the spiral. And only 5 had ever reached out for support. It was a very gradual downward spiral. And for them, feedback from one of them was, well, I used to get a lot of flow state. I was quite technical. I worked in a role where I could sink to the level of my skills and training. It was a wonderful experience. But now I'm managing people, and being a C-level executive, only the worst problems filter up to my desk. And so I spend all day dealing with the worst problems in 5-minute intervals. It's not fun. My attention is fragmented. It's no longer joyful. And so for them, we really tried to focus on purpose, passion. How can you re-engage the emotions that will support you? For the purposes of today, I thought let's just run through some practical tips for the downward spiral, for rapid bounce. Starting from the bottom, get some help. Even as leaders, it's important to reach out for support, have a conversation with someone, really do whatever you can to get some momentum, remembering that exercise and sleep are a great way to nudge that bounce process. At the distressed level, well, the body needs some time to rejuvenate, right? The zebra, after activating fight-flight mode, it returns to a state of calm within 30 minutes. All of the cortisol, adrenaline that's left the bloodstream, its breathing is back to normal. How often do we do that for ourselves? Sometimes it might be a micro break that's needed. Sometimes we might actually need to disconnect from the noise for a little while. Take a weekend off, try some yoga or have a massage, whatever it is that can reduce your cortisol and provide some space for the body to rejuvenate. Sleep, exercise, again, really foundational in terms of resilience. At that vulnerable level, renewal. And we talk a lot in our programs about tiny habits. Instead of creating massive change and deciding I'm going to run a marathon or creating these huge lofty goals that many of us do, what are some tiny habits? And the reason why tiny habits work is because they bypass our natural resistance. There's a phenomenon called homeostasis, which is all about how organisms strive for comfort. They prefer to stay in a comfortable state than to be disrupted. And we all experience that over the course of our lives. So if I decide I'm going to go for a 5K run, immediately homeostasis kicks in and says, why would you do that to yourself? There's a glass of wine in the cupboard over there. It will be much better. It'll be much more comfortable. And we start to create these stories, and I may or may not do it, or I may do it and hate it and then not do it again. Tiny habits bypass homeostasis by making it ridiculously small. So instead of going for a 5-mile run, I just go for a walk around my house, and that's it. Or I walk to the letterbox, or I just put on my activewear as first step. And then we gradually, incrementally expand these habits so that they go from 30 seconds to a minute and a half, and they become non-negotiable and they support us over the course of our life. At the withdrawn level, reconnecting, it's so important, so powerful. I was working with an elite sports team, and they have this protocol called having a cup of tea. Doesn't sound very interesting, but when a player has withdrawn, they've made a mistake in the match, player to player, peer to peer, they've developed a culture of just reaching out and saying, hey, would you like to have a cup of tea? So powerful. Problem shared, problem halved, and they're back, they're re-engaged with the group. But finding ways to do this, giving someone a call. At the disengaged level, while we're dealing with so much information, our brain quickly becomes fatigued. Can you take a break? A micro break is often all we need just to reset. And we'll look at that in a moment. And at the top of the downward spiral, at that confused level, simplifying. Multitasking is the opposite of flow. And it turns out that if I'm working on 5 threads simultaneously, 5 projects, 5 tasks, I lose 80% of my cognitive resource and time to context switching. rapidly jumping from one task to another, that's not going to support resilience. In fact, that quickly causes mental fatigue. So can I be disciplined about focusing on one thing at a time, removing distractions from the environment as much as possible, push notifications, terrible for our already fragmented attention span. Someone in 1986 consumed 5 times less information than someone in 2022. Our brains haven't had an upgrade. Our technology has. It's got more RAM and better CPUs and all of that stuff. Our prefrontal cortex, which is the executive attention part of our brain, it hasn't had an upgrade. We're just trying to filter information more effectively. And every year there is more and more information competing for this limited attention span. Can we batch process similar tasks? I do email from this time to this time. Then I try and create flow state. Then I have my meetings and create these rhythms for myself and the people I work with that supports resilience. We'll look at that over the course of the session. From a bounce perspective, what might you focus on? Simplifying, refreshing, connecting, having a chat to someone, maybe renewing, thinking of some tiny habits that might support you. And I will provide a little resource pack afterwards so that you can reflect on some of these ideas, or maybe getting some help. All right, let's go up the spiral to the realms of mastering stress. How do high-performance sports people and those in the military stay so unbelievably calm under pressure in those VUCA environments, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environments? Today, we'll practice together one of the most simple yet powerful techniques. This is an experiential session, so join me. And while I can't see all of you out there in the world, I trust that you are sitting down or standing up, and you'll join me with this very short practice. My objective is that by the end of the session, your cortisol and adrenaline are, this is almost a micro break for you, wherever you are. So sitting up nice and straight. Tactical calm is a way of signaling to the body that everything is okay. We break the anxiety feedback loop and bring ourselves to a state of coherence, which is calm, focused, connected. So with me, exhale the breath that you're on and breathe in for 3 seconds. Feel your ribs expand outwards. Now exhale for 5 seconds. 3, 4, 5, and continue. When we breathe in, the heart rate increases. And when we breathe out, it slows. Keep going in your own time. The net effect of tactical calm is a slower heart rate. Our human brain, the prefrontal cortex, comes back online. We shift out of fight flight into a more secure state. Keep going. The key is to focus on the long exhalation. Slow down the heart's rhythm. Breathe through the nose. It helps humidify the air, slow down the passage of air. You might even focus on something positive. It might be a place you're looking forward to going, perhaps the face of a loved one, perhaps the face of your child, unless your child is the reason you're using this technique. And then we return to the challenge at hand. What we've just done is create a little bit of space. We've reduced our cortisol. We've slowed down our heart rhythm, and we've better prepared ourselves for whichever challenge lies in store. There are lots of times when we can activate tactical calm. For example, relaxing into sleep. If I'm trying to fall asleep and my mind is drifting into the future and the past, the body responds as if that situation I'm imagining is happening right now. So if I'm lying in bed, it's 2 a.m. and I'm thinking about a performance review that's happening tomorrow, my body responds as if it's happening right now. I'll be full of cortisol and adrenaline and I won't be able to fall asleep. Long exhalations. Slow everything down, secure yourself, and the body will naturally become more relaxed, ease our way back into restfulness. During tense meetings, as a morning practice of mental preparation, during breaks, smart switching might be useful. Smart switching is being able to calm before entering a different environment. So a lot of people will shift from one environment, work, into another environment, home. Often it's just on the other side of the laptop, especially over the past couple of years. Instead of just rushing across into the home environment in fight flight mode, can I spend a minute, 6 breaths, calming myself? And what this does is it opens the empathy portal. You really need to spend a little bit of time to shift out of fight flight mode and open that empathy portal so I can enter a new environment and be fully human, taking notice of what other people need, what you need as well. But it does require a little bit of effort. If I just enter another environment in fight flight mode, well, you can imagine how an evening can unfold, or how a day can unfold, or if it becomes a habit, how every interaction unfolds. So spending a little bit of time creating some space can be incredibly powerful over the course of our life. There is a rhythm. You've probably heard of your circadian rhythm, but there is a rhythm called the ultradian rhythm. You can see cycles of deep sleep and REM sleep on the left-hand side. So during deep sleep, we rejuvenate. During REM sleep, we dream. And then they continue throughout the day. A lot of people didn't realize this. We have these natural cycles of alertness and rest. Most of us push through those dips during the day with urgency and coffee and other things, and I'm a supporter of coffee, don't believe me. But how often do we actually align our rhythms with nature's rhythms? There was a study of judges in Israel, and they wanted to know if there was any bias towards Arab or Israeli parole applicants. Really important study. They found that there was no bias, but then they mapped the outcomes to times of day, and this is what they discovered. The judges made positive decisions in that first peak of alertness, negative decisions during the natural dips, positive decisions just after tea break, the judges were refreshed, positive decisions for a little while after lunch, not even worth coming to court in the afternoon. The judges had disengaged. The judges were making decisions based on blood sugar level, based on fatigue, decision fatigue, a real phenomenon. And it's not to say those who were first in to see the judge even should have been let out of prison, but you can see the impact of daily rhythms on our decision-making, on our positivity. And what they did is start implementing micro breaks throughout the day, which can make a huge difference. So my question for you is, when might you use tactical calm? When receiving complex requests, shift out of fight flight mode, back to being fully human. During conflict, in micro breaks throughout the day. In traffic, that's a big one. In sporting activities, maybe with kids. Let's continue up the spiral. I told you it's going to be a whirlwind. Hopefully this is adding some value already. Moving up the spiral, what can we do to increase our energy levels, to improve emotion regulation, to detoxify the brain? There was one thing, it sounds like a late night infomercial, but there is one thing that we can do, and it's probably not watching those late night infomercials. It's actually sleep. In 1912, research showed that on average, adults were sleeping for 7.9 hours per night. Last year's research showed that we're down to 6.3 hours per night. And as a result, many of us are feeling mentally fatigued. So let's zoom out. Every morning for 3.8 or thereabouts billion years, 3.8 billion years or so, our planet Earth has orbited the sun, with half of the planet pointed out into the vast universe and half exposed to bright blue frequencies of light emitted by our home star. As such, we evolved a part of our biology called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, for those who are interested, which is highly sensitive to blue light, especially in the morning time. It wakes us up. Now, think about the evening. Our ancestors evolved with warm yellow light. Think sunset, fire, candles, the old incandescent light bulbs that have a little filament inside of them. Remember those ones? They all release yellow or a tungsten hue of light. Around 20 years ago, we started migrating to fluorescent bulbs, environmentally friendly bulbs. We got smartphones, we got iPads, we got laptops and Netflix, all of which emit a bright blue frequency of light. And as such, we're struggling to sleep. The body thinks it's always morning. So if there was one tip to provide you, and we can run 2-hour sessions on sleep, it's such a fascinating science, but if there was one thing I recommend, it's turn off as many bright lights as possible, especially in the last 2 hours before bed. So around 9 p.m., 10 p.m., we start to turn off all of those bright lights. Perhaps go and purchase one of those decorative bulbs that emit a yellow or tungsten hue and put that in a lamp in your living room, and you switch that one on. And research from around the world, research with thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that I've worked with, shows that just changing the lighting environment can have a tremendously positive impact on sleep, especially with little kids. What do? We take them to brush their teeth just before bedtime, and there's often bright LED downlights in the bathroom, and then they're all hyperactive. They don't want to fall asleep. If you change the lighting environment, darken it, take them through to the bedroom, brush their teeth, get ready for bed, it can make a huge difference. Some people take it to the extremes. They'll install Philips Hue or similar lighting technology. So in the mornings, the lights turn on with bright blue light frequencies, wakes us up. And in the evenings, it goes yellow, orange, red, out. And we find it has a massive impact on sleep. Give it a try. Also, reducing blue light exposure from devices. If you have to work on a screen late at night, you might get yourself some blue light filtering glasses. I sometimes do this. The family think I'm crazy, but anyway, it's like Brad's going cycling at 10 p.m. Anything to reduce blue light exposure. What else with sleep? Regularity helps, trying to stick to a regular rhythm, even on weekends, because if we wake up early all week and then late on weekends, and then we go back to that other rhythm on a Monday morning, well, we actually see a 25% spike in all hospital admissions on Monday morning. And it's a result of shifting circadian rhythms. In nature, we had one rhythm aligned with the sun and the night, whereas now we can control our rhythm. So just really think about regularity, think about timing. 7.5 hours is optimal, and think about lighting. Hope that's useful. Let's move up the spiral. Emotions. As I said, there are strong signals that drive us through our life. The word emotion comes from the Latin movere, which means to move. Has anyone felt like my friend over here in the past 72 hours? Now, I'm not a baboon psychologist, but I wouldn't be walking too close to that guy. It doesn't look too friendly at that particular moment. We all have a part of our brain responsible for some of those strong emotions, particularly anger, sadness, fear, craving, disgust. 5 of the primary emotions. Another one, happy. You see there's a little bit of a bias there towards the negative. Interesting. Where do these strong emotions, potentially destructive emotions, come from? There's a part of the brain called the amygdala. It's an almond-shaped node connected to the brain stem. It has a first look at data that arrives through our senses, and it responds fast, often with anger, sadness, fear, craving, and disgust. Unfortunately, it's not all that accurate, especially in our modern upgraded world with modern challenges. And it can cause a lot of damage when the amygdala hijacks our human thinking. We see a common pattern when the amygdala takes control. Let's have a look. There's usually a trigger from the environment. It could be a bad driver. It could be a performance review. It could be a donut shop. We experience an instant reaction. Our bodies usually tense up. Then a strong emotion, which might be that anger, fear, or craving. If we act on that emotion, we might experience, and this is really the defining feature of an amygdala hijack, a subsequent feeling of regret. I wish I hadn't acted that way. I lost my mind. I was seeing red. Good descriptions. The human brain was actually offline. The amygdala can short circuit our human thinking. And we go, wow, I wasn't me in those moments. You know, something else took control. And that's very true. The amygdala is a very powerful, some call it the watchdog of the brain. It's there to protect us from danger. And it can become encoded with trauma from the past. So, you know, that email arrives and I've been angry about it before. And in the midst of an amygdala hijack, I type back to that person, maybe in capitals, and I hit send. And a few moments later, blood flow restored to the PFC, the prefrontal cortex. Maybe I'll try and recall that one, but you know they're going to read it. It's even worse with text messages and so forth, because you can't recall them. it's out there, and then we try and backtrack, right? So is there a technique to mitigate the risk of amygdala hijacks? Absolutely. From a resilience perspective, this is really important. First, do nothing. Create some space. We already did that today with tactical calm. Allow the human brain, the prefrontal cortex, to come back online, to fact check our response. Breathe out. And then we respond calmly and firmly, if only to ourselves. Driving in traffic. Do I need to activate my fight mode right now? Do I want to give that person full control over my nervous system response? Maybe not. Maybe I'll choose when I want to activate that mode, because it is going to elevate my cortisol and my adrenaline. This is me driving my car, by the way. But it's useful to have those conversations and then decide on a different course of action. I go, you know what, today I'm not going to sweat it. Maybe their day is worse than mine. Maybe they're in a rush to get somewhere. Maybe they're going to hospital, and I'm going to draw a line, create some space, and not activate the amygdala in this particular circumstance. Practice, practice, practice. Sports people, think football players, have mastered impulse control a lot of the time, not all of the time, mastered it a lot of the time, but many elite sports people have mastered this. If you think of elite martial artists, they have to. They often say the person who starts activating fight-flight mode is going to lose. Those who stay incredibly calm under pressure usually win. If an elite sports person activates fight-flight, loses their mind on the playing field, their career is at risk. It's incredibly important to be able to master those strong emotions. It can improve all aspects of our life. We have 412 emotions that researchers identified. Take a look at the yellow segment. That's positive emotion. The rest are mostly negative. That's called our negativity bias. And it's why practicing positivity, and I say practicing it because we can practice positivity, has so many benefits. It improves cognition. If I believe I can or can't, I'm right. That's the old Henry Ford quote. It improves emotion. Of course, if I see the silver lining on problems, well, chances are things will get better. At least I'm creating some opportunity for things to get better. If I think everything's just going to go badly, I might not be surprised when they do. And being positive can add 7 years to our life. There's a longevity effect. And I think it's down to reduced cortisol over the course of our life. So positivity enables us to stay agile and present by noticing good things as they occur. Let's have a look at a very simple way to reframe situations. And before we go there, emotional literacy, and we go much deeper in our longer programs with organizations, emotional literacy encourages people to get granular about what they're experiencing. So instead of I am angry with you, that's going to trigger an amygdala hijack in the other person. I am feeling annoyed because of that behavior. You see the difference? Or I'm disappointed because of that event. Suddenly, it's not personal. We can start to verbalize what's happened, articulate what occurred, and we're activating the human brain. We're shifting ourselves out of fight-flight response. Really powerful. Many people I've worked with in customer service and so forth, they try and identify the subtle shades of emotion that they experience throughout the day, and they use it to help others, bring them out of an amygdala hijack. So for example, I understand that you must be feeling annoyed. Not, I know you're angry. I understand that you must be feeling annoyed because of this event. So what I'm going to do, suddenly you've created the opportunity to resolve the issue. So the simple technique I mentioned is called name it. I'm feeling annoyed because of this behavior. Tame it. We've done this already. You see a pattern emerging. Long exhalation, slow down the heart rhythm, create some space, and reframe it. Why am I feeling this way? What are my options? How's the other person doing? Is there another way to approach this particular situation? It can make a huge difference. It can really be the difference between, a career that I'm not enjoying and reframing and adding value. Think those CEOs at the bottom of the spiral, when they re-engage their sense of purpose and they started embracing life's day-to-day challenges through the lens of, we're here to create impact. We're here to care for others. We're here to innovate, whatever it might be. And reframing the day-to-day challenges, instead of I'm so angry with all these problems, this is an issue, but if I resolve it, it's going to help us collectively achieve that purpose. And how can I support you? It's really amazing when we start to activate resilience day to day. So I thought, why don't we do something practical? We've all been sitting for a little while, and Amy Cuddy and her team at Harvard wanted to know if some of the postures we find ourselves in our busy modern world are contributing to our perceived levels of stress. And it turns out absolutely, even just 2 minutes in a low power posture, hunched over a computer or hunched over a phone like this, can dramatically elevate our cortisol levels, increase our sense of anxiety. And you think about the anxiety epidemic that we're seeing with young people, what do more than ever before? They're hunched over devices. So here's something that we can practice together. And I encourage you with young people as well, if they're going to experience some device time, to get them to practice this. So stand up if you will, and we're going to practice some power poses. Right. Our minds can change our bodies, but our bodies can also change our minds. So this is a scientifically proven way to reduce cortisol by up to 25%. So level 1 power pose, palms forward, shoulders back. I'm standing up at the moment, but kind of crouched so that you see me. So palms forward. Very simple. We can do this anywhere. In a queue, in a meeting, in a conversation, doesn't matter. The next one you might not do during the middle of an important conversation, but you certainly could do it beforehand to reduce your cortisol levels. So hands up in the air. It's a universal sign of winning. This is what people do. Even visually impaired athletes, they do this when they win a race. It's joyful. It makes us feel good. If you're ever on the savannah in Africa and an elephant is charging towards you, don't run. Elephants are really fast. The best thing you can do is this. It doesn't always work, but you may as well give it a try. The next one, hands on hips, assertive posture. If someone walks up to you like this, they usually mean business. The primatologists tell us that's the posture that a dominant baboon would assume. My advice is to counter it with one of those. It helps if they've been through resilience training there. And finally, a good stretch, but it's also playful. The primatologists tell us that primates do this when they're feeling really safe and secure, because you're opening up, you're revealing all of your vital organs. You wouldn't do that when you feel threatened. When people feel threatened, they cross their arms. So this is a great antidote. It's playful. And there we go. In a minute, we've just shifted. Hopefully, we've reduced your cortisol further. And they also found it makes people more assertive, power poses. So continuing up the spiral to our minds, we experience up to 70,000 thoughts per day. That's a lot of activity. While our body is always in the present moment, our mind drifts into the past and the future. It's a time traveler, the prefrontal cortex. It's an amazing part of being human. Used deliberately, it enables us to plan, to strategize, to be creative, to innovate, to reflect on past events, to tell stories, to learn from what's happened, to analyze things that occurred in the past. However, left to its own devices, our minds have a tendency to worry about the future and ruminate over the past. For the next day, can you notice where your thoughts are drifting? There are lots of tools that you can use to build presence and focus. I suggest trying out maybe some meditation, maybe some breathing exercises. Remember tiny habits. It doesn't have to be a half hour sitting, chanting. It could be 30 seconds, just noticing the passage of your breath. If we had more time, we would try it out. But I encourage you, in the space after this meeting, just find somewhere, sit down, create some space, maybe put on some music with headphones, and just notice the passage of air as you inhale and exhale. That's level 1. We've done it already with tactical calm, but we take it to the next level by really tuning out from all of the distractions and noticing the stream of thoughts. That is the key. Because if you can tune into the stream of thoughts that are constantly running through your mind, you can create some distance and notice, oh, Those are just thoughts. That's not reality. Do I need to activate fight flight mode in response to a thought? Often not. And then we return to our everyday life. And the research shows that this has dramatic impacts. If I practice meditation for 5 minutes a day, the amygdala becomes less active. We naturally develop more positivity. The monkey mind, the chit chat that we experience is reduced. If I practice for 10 minutes a day over several years, eventually you get an epigenetic effect, which is that the genes responsible for inflammation are suppressed. So we actually start to feel better. We're more well over the course of our life, just from noticing that stream of thoughts. I encourage you to give it a try. What else can we do? Have clear lists. We talked about that when we looked at the downward spiral. Reduce distractions from the environments as much as possible. Protect that fragile attention span, because if we don't, it's going to quickly become overwhelmed. So I recommend turning off push notifications. Be deliberate about using technology. It makes a huge difference. Multitasking quickly depletes energy. So try and focus on one task at a time in our busy lives. Maybe catch some of those common thinking traps like, here we go again, or this is going to go badly, or you always do this, Brad. We all have those thinking patterns, right? Self-criticism is one of the highest risks that we measure using our resilience diagnostic tool. People are really hard on themselves, and that can send us down the spiral. It can activate fight flight mode without anything else except ourselves. Why do we do this? It's something we can unravel, and creating a little bit of space can really help. Okay, so we made it to the top of the spiral in record time. At the top of the spiral, we're finding flow state. We're aligned with our purpose. It's what the Japanese call your ikigai, where you're living in alignment with your values and your passions and your skills and what the world needs. It's where we get our momentum. So how do we create the conditions for flow? We need a clear goal, not too big, or not too small, something we can achieve in, say, 90 minutes or less. You'll notice a common pattern with things like films and sports matches and stage performances and so forth. They're usually about 90 minutes long. That is about the maximum for flow state. Otherwise, we become fatigued. We need to have skills to match the challenge. Too much skill, I might get bored. Too little skill, and I might get anxious. We need the right amount of time. It's important. Too little, and I'm anxious too much, and I'm bored. We need to minimize distractions from the environment. We've talked about that so much today, but it makes a huge difference. If I try and create the conditions for flow and I'm getting tapped on the shoulder and push notifications, and the opportunity is quickly lost. And finally, press play, just go for it. We resist the urge to check that email or go to the fridge or check the news. Just go for it. When we're in flow, we're 500% more productive. Teams in flow double their productivity. But remember, you can't stay in flow forever. It needs to be balanced with recovery, and that's resilience. Resilience is balancing performance with care. Your own performance, your team's performance with care and rhythms that support recovery. That's our focus at the Resilience Institute, is how can we balance performance with care? What might you do to get more flow? Clear goals, minimize distractions, diarize flow zone. Many of our clients actually have created a rhythm whereby on Friday for 1 hour, everyone tries to create the conditions for flow. And some have found it so impactful that they implement what's called monk mode. For the first half of every day, people just focus on their most important tasks. Meetings and disruptions happen later on in the day. But Friday flow zone, can you give yourself the gift of that tomorrow morning? Match your skills to the challenge, identify the right tasks, and learning some new skills can really help us get into flow. Resilience, in a nutshell, is about checking in with your body. How's your breathing? If I'm fatigued, can I go to bed a little earlier tonight? Turn off some of those bright lights. Can I change my posture? Do a power pose? Can I breathe out? Reduce my cortisol? Can I check in with my emotions? Name it, tame it, and reframe those emotions that make me less resilient? And can I check in with my mind? Are my thoughts drifting into the future, or are they drifting into the past? Can I bring them back to the present moment where the action is happening? One of my favorite quotes is, make this moment golden and your life becomes a series of golden moments. That's the objective of resilience. So I'll share with you a map of resilience day to day, because often resilience comes from daily practice. Can you align your rhythms with nature's rhythms, maybe including some resilience tools across that ultradian rhythm throughout the day? It's food for thought. Think about it with your family. Think about it with those that you care about, those that you work with. And finally, I hope the session was useful. Start small, be playful, and enjoy the practice. Remember, resilience is the journey, not the destination. I humbly pass that small flame of resilience to you to share with your friends, your family, colleagues, customers, and everyone that you care about. And as I mentioned, I'll make sure that there are some resources for you to share and review afterwards, including a digital copy of my book. And yeah, please do connect with me on LinkedIn or other platforms. You'll find me out there on the internet.
That's so awesome.
And there we go.
This is so awesome. So we have a few questions that came in. So most employees identify work as their number one stressor in their life. How can this type of training for our teams and our admin teams help to offset that?
Absolutely. And I think that's where that performance with care idea comes in. For a long time, it's been all performance. And some companies went too far into all care. It's finding the balance, right? So that we create rhythms and that support resilience, that support us dealing with the challenges. We prefer to get rid of that word stress and say, how are you responding to the challenges? Which challenges are sending you down the spiral, and which challenges are getting you into flow? And how can we get you support with those challenges that send you down the spiral? And how can we support you to get more flow state? And suddenly it's a very different conversation. It's more granular. We provide people with a common language and a framework that they can use to describe what's going on. The first and most important point, however, when we run these organizational programs is, can the leaders model resilience? Because if it's, here's some tools so that you do more with less, right, it can help people. And we've had lots of clients who just have that requirement. But if you get a leader who's saying, you know what, we're actually going to practice this together. Oh, yeah. And show some vulnerability. I'm working on this tiny habit right now. It becomes part of the culture. And we've had some amazing, amazing results when resilience becomes the enabler of transformation, or resilience becomes the enabler of whatever it is we want to achieve, rather than being part of the wellness bucket, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Resilience enables you to achieve what's important collectively.
I like that. That's so insightful. How much time should like a leader or a manager or CEO realistically devote to building these types of tools within their company or organizations?
Yeah, great question. So I think we strongly encourage leaders not to see this as another thing to do, because then there's resistance. I talked about homeostasis, right? Oh gosh, now I have to do a half an hour catch up about resilience. No, not at all. It's so critical to how we perform and how we recover. It shouldn't be something extra to do. It should be something that we just do automatically. Now, if you want a real time, so I've been doing a lot of work on this. There's a book by James Clear called Atomic Habits. And he says, if you can become 1% better each day over the course of a year, we are 37 times better with that compound effect. So I deconstructed this, of course. So if we have 16 hours of wakefulness a day, 1% of your day is 9.6 minutes. I believe that in 9.6 minutes per day, we can create massive change. Over the course of a year, we're 37 times better. And imagine if we do that collectively. So what do we do in those 9.6 minutes? We learn something and we do something. So spend 5 minutes learning a new tool, concept, discussing it, and 4.6 minutes to tactical calm, and 2.6 minutes energizing. And
I love it.
that's the foundation.
I like that a lot. How much training do you think is necessary before an organization or even an individual begins to see results?
I think people start to see results immediately. Obviously, there's resistance at the beginning, but I think that if you build up skills and practices in the tiny habits way, there's much less resistance. So our common approach is we measure a group. We've got a tool called the Resilience Diagnostic Assessment. It's part of our Resilience app platform. It looks like this. We measure, each individual gets a score, and then the group gets a score as a whole. And then we provide some kind of training intervention, whether it's one webinar or a whole series of webinars or a workshop back in the days when we could come and see people face to face.
Yeah.
And then we measure again, and we find after 6 weeks, on average, resilience has increased by 38%. So that's from our own research.
Wow. That's really, really great. How can we help? I think someone put this in earlier. How could they help with motivation and avoiding despair? But I feel like, so many of the things that you talked about, especially when you talked about the downward spiral and the things that we can do with that, you gave so many valuable tips there on what we can do to remotivate and energize our teams, as well as avoid despair, whether that's seeking help or, being vulnerable or seeking connection in that way. Is this something that you feel like could be valuable even with our workforce? So not just with our teams that are working in our industry, so our admin teams and things like that, but as nanny agencies who are then providing labor to other families. So the actual people who are going out, is this something that you find to be valuable in all sectors and in all of those levels?
Absolutely. We've run the program with everyone from C-level executives at PwC to factory workers, to teachers, to first responders, and it has an amazing impact. We ran a study with a school, and we trained up the teachers to run our resilience training program, or at least be equipped with the skills from our program. And the results were amazing. And in fact, we tried it out with the extended community, so parents of the kids, and the resilience collectively increased. It was such an amazing ripple effect. So I think these skills can be developed by anyone, and that's why our program is successful. It's an integral approach, or a holistic approach to resilience. It's not just mind, body, or emotion, it's everything. And you can go really deep for leaders in terms of empathy and situation agility and influence, but you can also keep it really practical. Can you bounce? Can you grow? Can you connect? Can you flow? And of course, it's going to work for everyone.
Oh, that's really so great. Is this something that you find now that we're unable, maybe in some forms, to travel and be with one another? Is this a platform or a type of training that you found to still be successful and highly beneficial, even if it's done remotely? So for companies that have remote teams and that are trying to connect, especially since that connection portion is so integral, is that something you still find to be valuable, even if it's done remotely as a team?
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you think about just this session, we've just spent 58 minutes together, and I'm sure that people have found something useful. I mean, I'm super passionate about resilience. I've run this program with teams globally, with companies like, for example, Electronic Arts, teams around the world, from all different cultures, and everyone finds something that resonates on that spiral. And as people move up the spiral, they find more tools that they can master. In terms of team by team, 100%, in fact, we have a global team in every continent, but I sit here in New Zealand, where I'm based at the moment, and I run teams programs for distributed teams across every continent. And I think if you can provide that forum for conversation, and we've become quite good at it, even just using breakout rooms and chat boxes and that kind of thing, it's really powerful, and it builds up that momentum, and it reconnects people with a kind of a common framework. Like, hey, we've all been experiencing this disruption. We activate our empathy portal together, and then here's some really positive tools and skills that we can use, not just together, but in our own lives. Yeah. So many organizations kind of say, hey, this is a gift from us to you, to say thank you for dealing with all of the change that we've had, but also it's going to help us to balance that performance with care. And the results are quite amazing.
Oh, thank you, Brad. Thank you so much. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling super chill. Heart rate is leveled out.
Good.
Feeling very informed about things that we can all do. I hope you all that have been on, and even for those who will watch our replay, come away from here with tips that you can put into play immediately. What can you do before the end of the day today? What can you do tomorrow to really provide benefits to yourself and then to ripple that out to your organizations? And we will be sending out Brad's information to everyone who signed up for the webinar, and even all those who signed up who were unable to come on because of work obligations, who will be watching the replay. You will all get his information along with the resource pack so that you can touch base with him personally if you would like to. If you'd like to book him for your company, you can do so. We really just want to encourage everyone across the industry to really take time to focus on their internal health and their mental health so that we can be more productive and we can be more impactful as an organization. A few housekeeping notes. The replay for this session will be out to everyone within 5 business days. Our next webinar is on Thursday, April 21st. We will be having a wonderful speaker speaking on DEI as a path to business growth and development. So if you've ever wondered how that affects your bottom line, this is a session that you will want to take part in. Once again, APNA is committed to your education, our personal growth, and our growth as an organization. We hope you continue to stay invested in growing and learning and upskilling yourself so that we can all be impactful in our various circles of influence. Thank you so much, Brad, for your time today. And thank you everyone for attending. We hope to see you next time.
Thanks, Erica. Bye.
Bye.